Server 2016 installation media mounted to the DVD drive of our single machine here in the virtual lab. So as soon as you fire it up, give it a second and it'll launch you right in to the installation wizard. Now, if you were with me in our previous lab and we installed and configured Windows Server 2016, the desktop experience, the full GUI, you're going to notice that this is the exact same process with one little difference, and that is when we choose our edition and installation option. So I'm going to go through this all over again. If you are with me, feel free to fast forward till the end of the installation process. If not, let's do it. So opening screen here, very simple. Choose your language, time and currency format, keyboard or input method, and hit next. Then we can choose to install now. Here is that screen where we make the decision between Server Core or the desktop experience. Notice that Server Core is the default. Microsoft made that change back in Server 2012. They started pushing us towards Server Core because it is much more lightweight and more secure. So these two are Server Core. Here is the full GUI, your desktop experience. We're going to be installing Data Center Edition here for Server Core, so go ahead and choose that third option and hit next. Before we can go any further, we must accept the end user license agreement. So check that box to accept the EULA. I love that acronym. It just sounds so epic. And hit next. Next up, we need to choose our installation type. Do we want to perform an upgrade? And you'll only be able to choose this option if you already have an operating system on this machine, or a clean installation, which is what we're going to choose here. So go ahead and choose that second option. Next up, we need to choose what disk and partition we want to place Windows on. So all of your disks will be listed here. If those disks contain partitions, they will also be listed here. And we can choose those partitions. These buttons will light up, so we have the opportunity to manage them here from this screen. Now, we have one completely empty 40 gigabyte disk with no partitions on it, which is why we see drive 0 unallocated space. If we were to hit next right now, it would use all of this space. It would reserve a little bit for the system partition, and then it would use the rest for the primary partition, and that's where Windows will go. And we can actually see that if we hit the new button. Say we didn't want to use all 40 gigs. Maybe we only wanted to use roughly 36 gigs. We can type in 35,000 megabytes, hit apply. This dialog is just going to let us know that it will need to reserve a little bit of that for the system partition, so we'll hit OK here, and just give it a second, and now we should see two partitions. There's our system partition, there's the primary partition where Windows will go, and here is the rest of that space that we didn't allocate. So we could create another partition from this, or if we choose, again, an existing partition, we can now delete it, we could extend it. Maybe we did want that 60 gigabytes wrapped in, we can hit the extend button, or we could format it. So if we have an existing partition on a disk, and we don't care about the data, we could format it, blow it away, and start fresh with that partition. So I'm actually going to go ahead and extend this, choose our total size, hit apply, hit OK, and it's going to wrap the rest of that unallocated space into that partition. Now, we also have this refresh and load driver button down here. If you have disks attached to your machine, but they're not showing up in this list, that means Windows doesn't have the appropriate drivers to see or communicate with that disk. So you would get the drivers from the manufacturer. If you have them lying around, pop them on a DVD or USB drive, pop that into your machine, hit this load driver button and browse to it, hit OK, and when you're back to the screen, you can hit refresh, and they should show up. And that's that. So let's go ahead and choose our second partition here and hit next. And that's it. So I'm going to give this just a couple of minutes. If you're following along, go ahead and pause me. I'll meet you back when it's done. Once installation has completed, you'll be planted into the command prompt here. And the final thing we need to do is supply the password for the local built-in administrator account. So I'm going to use the lab controls to send a control delete over, hit enter here to confirm, and now we just need to type in our password, or you can use the lab controls to paste it in, then hit tab, and we'll paste it in one more time. All right, now hit enter, letting us know that we have successfully changed the password. Hit OK, and we're done. Here is the user interface for Server Core. It's just the command prompt. And this is where, if you've never been on Server Core before, you're not comfortable with the command line, you're thinking to yourself, well, now what? All we have is the command prompt. What do we do? So this is where having some command line or PowerShell skills comes in very handy. Although, in the real world, you're going to be managing your Server Core installations remotely with graphical tools. But we only have a Server Core machine in this lab, so we need to get familiar with how to manage Server Core when you're actually on a Server Core machine. And one really easy way to get started here is to use our quote-unquote graphical user interface utility here for Server Core, which is known as sconfig. So let's just go ahead and type in sconfig and hit enter. So think of this like Server Manager for Server Core. It gives us quick access to a lot of those common configuration points, and it's good for those one-off configurations. So we can do things like manage our domain and workgroup membership. We can change the computer name. Notice we have a randomly generated computer name, just like we did with the desktop experience. We can configure remote management, our Windows update settings, even do on-demand Windows updating there. We can control network settings, date and time. Telemetry settings are new here in Server Server 2016. This is the data that we want to send to Microsoft. We've got 4 options inside of there. We can activate Windows, and then, of course, we can log off, restart, shut down, and exit back to the command line. Now, we're not going to use this. We're going to use command line tools as well as PowerShell to complete our post-installation configuration tasks. So I'm going to go ahead and type in 15 here to exit back to the command line. There we go. And I'm also just going to get our UI so we can get both command line and PowerShell here in one view. All right, cool. Let's go ahead and clear the screen, and I'll do a start PowerShell. That'll launch us into a new PowerShell session. We'll also just get our UI sorted out here. Beautiful. Now, we could just use PowerShell for everything, including executing our legacy command line tools. For instance, here we could do an IP config. So look at our IP configuration. That is a legacy command line tool. So I like to get this clear distinction here. So all of our old school tools we'll use using the command prompt, and anything PowerShell related, we'll stick to the PowerShell shell. All right, I think we're ready to configure this bad boy. So we need to get it on the network by assigning it a static IP address and some DNS servers. We're going to look at how to disable the firewall for all of our profiles, and we're going to rename the computer. So what I'm going to do first here is just clear the screen down here in PowerShell, and let's head back up to the command prompt, and we'll put ipconfig in its proper place. So notice right now we have an APIPA, 169.254. That stands for an automatic private IP address. We have this configured for DHCP, that's its initial configuration, and it couldn't find a DHCP server, so it went, oh, I don't know, here's an APIPA. So we're not on any network right now. In fact, if we attempt to ping google.com, going to say, oh, sorry, can't do it. And we actually have a router behind the scenes here acting as our gateway to the internet. Its location is 192.168.1.1, so we need to get on that network. So let's configure our server core machine with a static IP address and some DNS servers so we can get on and outside of that 192.168.1/24 network. The old school way of doing this is using a command line utility known as netshell, or netsh for short. So there it is. Notice that we are configuring this based on the name of the network card. That's how we refer to it. We're assigning a static IP of 192.168.1.101. There's the subnet mask, and there is the default gateway. Now, I'm not going to hit enter here because we're actually going to physically do this using PowerShell. So let's start in PowerShell here, and let's do a get net adapter, not metadapter, net adapter. And you can start typing and hit tab, and it'll cycle through all of the PowerShell commands that we can use. And you can use shift tab to go backwards. So here's everything that starts with what I typed in. I'm going to go back here to get net adapter and just hit enter. And this will show us the only adapter that we have attached to this machine. There is the name, Ethernet. That's how we refer to it up here in netshell. And here's also the index. It also shows us the MAC address here. So now that we have this information, the name or the index, we can use the commandlet new net IP address. And there it is, new net IP address. We can pass in the interface index or the name of the network interface card that we want to configure. Pass in the IP address. We're going to do, again, 1.101. Prefix length is another way of representing the subnet mask. We're saying the first 24 bits are on, so that's the equivalent of 255.255.255.0, and there is our default gateway. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and that is going to configure our card. There it is. Now, if we head back up to the legacy command prompt here, I'm going to hit escape and recall a few commands ago to ipconfig, and check it out. Our new IP configuration has stuck. Now we can try the good old ping. I'm going to recall a few more commands to go here until we get to pinggoogle.com. Hit enter. Uh-oh. Why didn't that work? We don't have any DNS servers. So that's our next step. We need to set up some DNS servers. And we're going to use Google's DNS servers here. And the legacy way to do this is, again, through netshell. So that will configure the first DNS server, the primary DNS server. We can also do a second DNS server, like so, and then pass in index equals 2. That'll configure a secondary DNS server. But again here, let's use PowerShell for this. So let's head back to the shell. And here we use the set DNS client server address commandlet. We pass in, again, the interface for the card that we want to configure, and then we can pass in our server addresses. Here we're going to pass in a primary and a secondary. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and that will configure it. Let's verify that. I'm going to escape out up top. We'll clear the screen here. And we need to run an ipconfig/all so we can see our DNS settings as well in here. So I'm going to scroll up and check it out. We've got DNS servers. And by the way, the PowerShell equivalent of ipconfig is get net IP configuration. You just start typing in get-net IP-con, hit tab, and it'll type out the rest for us. We hit enter, and you're going to see a lot of the same information that we saw up top, just a lot less of it. So there's our IP address, default gateway, and both of our DNS servers configured. Now we can execute a ping. Let's head back up to the command prompt here, and let's try to ping google.com. And look at that. We have a response. So that's it as far as network configuration goes. Remember, from the command line, NetShell is your friend. From PowerShell, let me show you how you can get a big listing of all the commandlets for working with network-related configurations. Get command is your friend in PowerShell. It's our search engine essentially on top of everything PowerShell. So we can do get command, and we can pass in the specific module here. How about net adapter, for instance? And that's going to show us all of the commandlets that we can use for configuring a network adapter. Now, you can also just use pass in a wildcard. Maybe we want everything with net in it, or everything that starts with net. We can do something like this. So this will return all the commandlets that start with net. And there's not going to be any because everything starts, it's a verb now naming convention, right? So it's going to be set, get, remove, all that kind of stuff. So what we can do here, if we wanted to get everything that starts with net on this side, the noun, not the verb, we can pass in noun. Now it'll get us anything that starts with net after the dash. If we hit enter, everything across all the modules. So net security, net adapter, net TCP IP, all kinds of commandlets here to work with. So yeah, get command is definitely your friend when learning PowerShell and what commandlets you need to use to get the job done. Next up, let's configure the firewall. Let's start with the old school way of doing it. And once again, this is going to be NetShell. Now, we can get into an interactive command prompt here with NetShell. If you just type in netsh and hit enter, check it out. Now we are inside of NetShell. We can hit a question mark to see what our subcommands are underneath this. And there's all kinds of them here. So you'll see interface in there. If we head up, we're looking for ADV firewall. So now we can just type in ADV firewall, and now we are inside of that. And I love this message. Check it out. It's basically telling you, don't do this anymore. Get familiar with PowerShell because the future is PowerShell, and who knows how long these legacy command line tools will be around for. But now we can do another question mark. We can see all the things we can do with the firewall. Here it is. So we're going to do netsh ADV firewall, and what we want to do is a set here. We want to set all profiles. Remember, we have 3 profiles, public, private, and domain, their state to off. And what that's going to do is turn off the firewall for all of those profiles. Let's just verify that down in PowerShell. In PowerShell, we can run a get net firewall profile. I'm just going to hit tab here until we get to the P's. There it is, get net firewall profile. And this is going to return the state of all 3 of those profiles. And what we should see is they were all disabled. So check out the second property here. For the domain profile, enabled is now false. Same here for private, false, and for public, false. Now, if we wanted to re-enable it using PowerShell, we can use the, you guessed it, set net firewall profile, just like so. Pass in our profile. We can pass in all of the profiles here. We can do domain, public, private, and then we just set the enabled property here to true. And that's going to re-enable it for all of those profiles. So if we recall a few commands ago, just hit the up arrow on your keyboard and hit enter. Now it's going to be re-enabled here for all of those. So I'm going to recall a few commands ago again here, and let's just turn that back to false. Perfect. Now another nice trick here is getting help on these commandlets. So let me clear the screen here. So let's say you were using get command to hunt around for specific commandlets. Maybe I wanted to find the commandlet that I can use to rename a computer. So what I would do here is run a get command and surround the word computer with wildcards. This is going to return all the commandlets that have the word computer in it. And look at that. There is rename computer, as well as restart computer, stop computer, get computer info, which is a great commandlet, by the way. It gives you all kinds of information about the machine that you're on. So now we know what commandlet we're going to need, rename computer, but how do I use it? This is where we can use get help. And then we can pass in the name of the commandlet, rename computer in this case. Hit enter, and that's going to show us how to use this commandlet. Give us the name, the syntax, what parameters it accepts, and the data types those parameters accepts, some aliases and remarks. And now that's just going to give us the very bare bones help topic. We have parameters here to get examples, to get the full help topic, to get detailed help topic. I'm going to pass in full here, and it's going to show us all of the parameters, the properties around those parameters, and give us virtually everything here. But one thing you'll want to do before doing this is run an update help. That way we get the full help topics and the latest and greatest help. And I'm not going to do this because it'll take a bit, but we do have internet connectivity, so feel free to do so in the lab here and play around with the help for these commandlets. So let's scroll back up here and let's take a look at how we're going to use the rename computer commandlet. Now, everything is in brackets, which means everything is optional. So if we just type in rename computer, it's going to prompt us for all of these things. But we're going to rename the computer, pass in a new name, And then we're going to pass in the restart parameter. So that'll change the name and restart the computer. Now, before we do this here, let me show you the legacy way of doing this. And it's actually using a tool. We need to quit out of net shell here. The legacy command line tool here is called netdom. So we can do netdom, rename computer, pass in the current computer name that we want to rename, which is going to be this name. We'll use an environment variable, which will resolve to the current machine that we're on. And then we can pass in new name, colon, and then the name of the machine. We're going to rename this to core nug. It's currently stuck on its default name. And that's it. That's the legacy way of doing it. And by the way, just to verify that if I run a host name up here, you'll see we've got that randomly generated computer name. So let's change that using PowerShell. Let's do rename computer, just like so. Pass in the new name parameter here. Let's call this core nug. And then we'll pass in the restart flag. Hit enter, and that's that. And we're back. Let's send a Control-Delete over there and paste the password in using the lab controls. Hit enter. And now, in the command prompt here, we can type in a host name, and look at that. We are now core nug. Now, we can also go into PowerShell, and I'm not doing a start PowerShell, notice. I'm just going to do a PowerShell, which will keep us in the command prompt, but we're still in PowerShell. Notice the PS here. I know this can be confusing, which is why I do a start PowerShell, so we get our lovely blue screen and we know that we're actually in PowerShell. But in PowerShell, we can use the environment variable env colon and start typing in COMP and hit tab. It'll finish it out, and there it is. That's how we can get it. Now, we can also, let's exit out of this. We can also use sconfig. So now we're back into the real command prompt. We can run an sconfig to verify all of those configuration points as well. There's core nug. We can hit 8 here to go into our network settings, choose 0 for our network adapter index, and there is our IP configuration, our IP address, default gateway, our DNS servers. I'm going to hit 4 to go back to the main menu, 15 to exit back to the command line. And one more thing I want to show you here. What if you close out of command.exe? Uh-oh, now what do we do? You're stuck. How do we get it back? It's pretty easy. Just hit a Control-Delete. I'm going to hit it there from the lab controls, and there is our Control-Delete menu. So an easy way to do it is just to sign out and sign back in. See that? Sign out and boom, we got it back. Another way to do it though is actually using Task Manager to relaunch command.exe. So inside of here, I'm going to close out. Oh no, it's gone. Well, we hit Control-Delete, head down here to Task Manager, hit more details, hit File, run new task, and type in cmd.exe, which is why I just like to log out and log back.